This is the smell of the leftover tuna fish sandwich you left in your lunchbox over the weekend in a wimpy trash bag.
Wimpy, wimpy, wimpy!
Blech! And this is the smell of that same sandwich in a hefty, ultra-strong trash bag.
Hefty, hefty, hefty!
Ah, smell the difference? Hefty Ultra Strong has Arm & Hammer with continuous odor control, so no matter what's inside your trash, you can stay one step ahead of stinky. And for bigger jobs, try the superior strength of Hefty Large Black Bags.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be going back to the 18th century, and we're going to be looking at the daughter of probably one of the most infamous figures in early American history, Aaron Burr. We're going to be looking at his daughter, Theodosia Burr, and the mystery of what happened to her.
Yeah, you know, Ray, it's always interesting how there are certain things that attract us to a particular individual. And we probably would have seen Theodosia Burr just be a distant memory in the course of history if it wasn't for that 2015 musical sensation, Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And when Hamilton came to the stage, of course, it's focused on the delightful adventures of Alexander Hamilton, but also his relationship and the controversy between him and Burr. But in the midst of that play, we see a man, Aaron Burr, and the love that he has for his daughter and the dreams and the plans that he has for her, hoping that she will experience a life that will be full of adventure, full of education, and just full of promise coming into this new independent country of America. So I think that this podcast is going to be really cool because it takes the story of someone who might not be known to us, but it has North Carolina roots to it also. And I think that's what makes this one of those really important history you didn't know but should podcasts we're going to do.
Yeah, and you know, Theodosia's entire life, everything about her life is just baptized in history, Chris. I mean, she's born in 1783 there in Albany, New York. Her father is part of George Washington's inner circle during the Revolution. She's a well-educated young lady. She studies math, she studies language, she studies English. She's given all sorts of tutoring as a child and as a teenager that, the average female for her time, Chris, would not have received that kind of education. In fact, by the time she was 12 years old, she could speak Latin, French, German, and even read Greek.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that not only did she have that educational background, but that was something that her father was adamant that she receive. He wanted to train her to be a well-educated young woman who would truly make a difference in society. And if there's anything to be said about Theodosia Burr, the one thing that we can say is that this young lady was devoted to her family. She loved her mom, but she had an extreme adoration and love for her father. Her mom dies when Theodosia is 10. And by the way, her mom's name was actually Theodosia also. And her mom dies at the age when Theodosia was 10. And at that point, Aaron Burr, who is completely devastated by the loss of his wife, he will spend basically the remainder of his life hopelessly devoted and attached to his daughter, pouring everything he has into making sure that she is successful.
With Theodosia's story, we get another side of Aaron Burr. A lot of times when we think about Aaron Burr, everybody thinks about the vice president who shot Alexander Hamilton, the former Secretary of Treasury. We think about the man who who tried to go down and create his own empire where he would be the king or the emperor and Theodosia would be his queen and all of that. That's what people generally think about when they think about Aaron Burr, or maybe they think about the election of 1800 where he tied with Thomas Jefferson in the presidential election. But this is another side of Aaron Burr. This is not the controversial, outspoken, power-seeking Aaron Burr. This is an Aaron Burr who is very devoted, not just to his wife, but to his daughter. And she becomes a big supporter of his all through his life. Everything he did, whether it was his killing of Hamilton, she defended him after that, whether it was his involvement in trying to create a new kingdom, she defends him with that. She defends him every step of the way. And you know what, Chris, in the process, I mentioned earlier in the opening that, she grew up at a time, she was born at a time and grew up in a time when the revolution was going on and the world was changing, the nation was changing. And she got to be in close contact with people like George Washington, people like Thomas Jefferson, and even Alexander Hamilton, even though her father and Hamilton, were pretty much put on this earth to hate each other. She got to be in the center of history in a way that very few people do.
And I think it's just another reminder that when we study history, it's so important that we understand all aspects of one person's life. Yes, Aaron Burr, as you mentioned, he is the villain in the Hamilton Broadway. He is the villain in history textbooks. But at the end of the day, you look at him and you see that he truly had a passion for family and wanting to take care of them. And then I think that kind of leads to Theodosia, that he modeled that and Theodosia embraced that. And I'm pretty confident she had many suitors, many people that were pining for the hand of the daughter of Aaron Burr. And her heart was drawn to, which is very interesting, to a Southern individual from South Carolina who was the heir to rice plantation, whose name was Joseph Alston. And that even though she gets married and will have a child and will go down south, her heart still remains wherever Aaron Burr, her father, is.
Yeah, and I believe she writes in a letter at some point that she didn't like it in South Carolina, that she wanted to be back up in New York, where she was born, where she was raised, where her father was, where maybe you could say her heart was. But she marries Joseph Alston, as you say. They actually honeymoon at Aaron Burr's Richmond Hill mansion. They stay there before actually going down to South Carolina to live at a place called the Oaks, I believe it was. And, that was a very good marriage. Some maybe say, oh, well, she married, a wealthy guy or this, that, and the other. But I think all evidence is, especially evidence we'll talk about a little later, this was not just a business marriage or a political marriage. This was a love marriage.
Yeah, it was a marriage made out of love, but you have to ask yourself, and I know we've just talked about how great Aaron Burr was in relationship to his daughter, but we kind of have to wonder. At this point when Theodosia gets married, Burr is not just in trouble politically. He's not just in trouble, relationally, but he's also in trouble financially. He's lost everything. Yep. Nobody's going to give him the time of day for all that he has done. What his actions have been with Hamilton, what his actions have been with the country, what his actions have been in so many ways. He has no friends. The only person he has is Theodosia. And you have to wonder if in the back of his mind, he didn't think, well, I don't really know about her marrying a Southern guy, but he's got a plantation, which means he's got some money, which means that I'm kind of broke and that maybe it just might work out. Love, but also money in this. I'm not saying that was the case, especially not for Theodosia, because as you mentioned, there are letters in which she truly loved her husband. But she also loved leaving him and kind of going up back to the Hudson River Valley and enjoying the countryside and also spending some time with her dad there.
Yeah, and the story of Theodosia and her husband Joseph it's a sad story in many ways. Yes, it's a story of two people from different worlds coming together and hopefully, living happily ever after. But that's certainly not the case. They have a son who they also named Aaron Burr, interestingly enough, in May of 1802. And the birth was not a smooth birth. It was a difficult birth, and it left her with a lot of health problems that really are going to bother her for the rest of her life. And not only that, prevent her from having additional children. And, what's going to happen to her son, of course, he is going to die a few years later. I think he was like 10 years old. He's going to die of malaria. And she writes Aaron Burr, her father, and he's overseas at the time. And she writes him this very, probably for him, shocking letter. The news that his grandson had died, but also it's a very pitiful letter.
Yeah, and so we start to see this tragedy begin to develop with Theodosia after having experienced all that her father has gone through. She marries this guy who is the heir to a rice plantation fortune, but then he decides to get involved in politics. And you kind of have to feel for Theodosia because she's already seen what politics has done to her father. And now she sees her husband entering into the ring, if you will. He gets elected to the South Carolina State House of Representatives and then eventually will become governor of South Carolina. But what we notice is that when her son dies of malaria, she had already experienced health issues from the birth. She's now going into a deep state of depression, if you will, at the loss of her son. But the fact that her husband is always gone, never at home. And even though he writes letters talking about how devastated he is, about all of these things, they're still apart. So here's Theodosia, who would probably feel like she's on an island all by herself, having lost her son, having technically lost her father, and now having lost her husband due to politics and travel and things like that. That she finds herself in a very vulnerable position. I think Aaron Burr, even though he is living abroad because that's the safest place for him to be right now, decides that action has got to be taken. And the very best thing that can happen is for her to come to New York. Maybe she can get some therapy at some of the spas that are up there at New York. Maybe it will be kind of helpful for her, just to kind of get some of that clean northern air, I guess, if you will. But Alston, a very protective husband, if you will, is not really comfortable with allowing her to make the trip because you've got political issues that are going on in America. The country is now at war with Britain because this is around 1812 when this is going on. You've got Theodosia, who is just really struggling emotionally, mentally, physically, in so many different ways. And Alston's like, I'm governor. I can't go with her to New York because I got to take care of the stuff here. Theodosia's saying, I've got to get to New York. I'll be fine. You got Aaron Burr saying, I'm coming. I'm going to do whatever I can, but I can't get there. So really, we see everybody working together to try to help Theodosia, which lead them to decide that the best thing that they can do is to put her on a ship and to send her up along the coast to New York, where hopefully she can get some rest, rehabilitation, and recover.
Her husband, Joseph, like you said, he's very reluctant to allow her to make this trip, but she's insistent and she does. But what he does two very important things for her. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about, I think this was a marriage of love. I think these two people genuinely loved each other. He, number one, used some of his connections and got a letter that if the ship that she was on, called the Patriot, was captured by the British, she would be able to use this letter to escape. In other words, it was sort of like, she's okay, let her go. So if the ship was captured by the British, hopefully it would allow her to continue on her voyage. But number two, a physician, a doctor, Timothy Green, and also a close friend, was put on the boat with her. So they did what they could do, I suppose, to provide her with a safe trip to New York to see her father. So they get on the boat, the Patriot, at Georgetown in South Carolina on December 31st, 1812. The boat, sets out a journey to New York, which is supposed to take, I believe, like 4 to 6 days, somewhere in like that ballpark. And then day 7, day 8, day 9, day 12, day 14, day 15 go by. No Patriot, no Timothy Green, no Theodosia Burr. And what happened? It just seemed like the ship just vanished into thin air.
Yeah, and I think even today, we have conspiracy theories that are all out there trying to figure out, what happened, where is she? I believe that her husband wrote a letter, and he said basically, to this is what his words were, quote, "Another mail and still no letter. I hear two rumors of a gale off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina at the beginning of the month. The state of my mind is dreadful," which once again goes back to the theory that you have about this being a relationship of love. And, there was talk that she had been captured, that the boat had been captured by pirates, and that people had been made to walk the plank, that, all of these things start going on. And Aaron Burr, who you would think pretty much would say, I will never stop believing she's alive until there's proof that she's dead. He basically early on kind of dismissed that she was alive, that she had been captured or anything, because, he basically said, here's another quote. This is from Burr. He says, quote, no, she is indeed dead. Were she still alive, all the prisons in the world could not keep her from her father.
Right.
Just speaks to the relationship that they have. And so I don't know. What do you think, Ray? I mean, we seem to think that maybe pirates might have captured them and they might have been killed, or maybe they were shipwrecked. You have any theories as to you think what happened?
Yeah, we know there was a storm off the coast of Cape Hatteras in early January 2, January 3, somewhere in that ballpark. So I think probably many think it's likely, and I would tend to agree, that the ship wrecked during that storm, that it was wrecked and all on board were lost, which, the coast of North Carolina has its nickname for a reason, the graveyard of the Atlantic. I've got in my office a picture of all the many shipwrecks right there off the coast, from the Outer Banks down to the southern border of North Carolina, where there's just been so many wrecks. But I think it's most likely that they just perished in a shipwreck on January 2 or 3.
Yeah, there's one other story that I find interesting, and it might be something we think about talking in a future podcast, because North Carolina, the coast of North Carolina, is full of stories of pirates and the many adventures that they did to basically get their cargo and their riches, if you will. But there was one story that was out there that I found just I don't know, just shows the work that these pirates would do, and that is that the Patriot had gotten too close to the Sandbank Islands near Nags Head, North Carolina, because what would happen is there was a group of, I guess you would call them pirates. They were known as the Carolina Bankers.
Right.
And what they would do is when the storms were coming, they would take a horse and tie a lantern around the horse's neck, and they would walk the horse up and down the beach. And so the ships in the area would see the light, and they would think, oh, okay, we're following another ship that's taking us through these treacherous shoals to safety. And what's actually happening is the pirates are luring these ships into the breakers, into the shallow waters, which causes them to run aground. And then the pirates would basically just board the ships, and they would take over the cargo and all of the other things. And it's possible that this happened, as you mentioned, there was a storm, and that these pirates could have taken over them, and basically they could have been killed. Or, as that mystery does seem to suggest, maybe, just maybe, she establishes a new life on Nag's Head and just lives out the rest of her life there. But I just don't think that happened because of what you were saying about the relationship she had with her husband, but also the relationship she had with her father. Surely to goodness, Theodosia would never, as Aaron said, not a prison would have been able to have kept her from her father. There was so much love that she had for those two individuals. I don't think she would have just escaped and started a new life. That just doesn't sound like a feasible explanation.
Yeah, to wrap up, just a few notes. Joseph, her husband, would spend a number of years in depression following her death or disappearance. They said he would sit in her bedroom and just cry for hours on end. Eventually, he's going to suffer a seizure, which will take his life. And Aaron Burr, of course, he's going to live until 1836. And because of his activities, not having anything to do with Theodosia, because of his activities, he's going to die in poverty. But something, Chris? No good mystery would be a good mystery without a ghost story. Right? Without there being some sort of ghost involved. And of course, there are stories and legends of the ghost of Theodosia Burr. And so maybe she's still out there somewhere, haunting the coast of North Carolina. Who knows?
There's a lot of people that go to Bald Head Island. And as you've said, there have been people, the paranormal world that has seemed to have seen an apparition, if you will, of someone that resembles Theodosia wearing the outfit that she had when she boarded the Patriot, and that there's these 3 headless pirates that are chasing her around. So I don't know. I've always heard Bald Head to be one of those really nice, exclusive places. I don't know if they would welcome a bunch of headless pirates running around the island. Might be bad for tourism.
Anyway, thanks, Chris, for your help with this episode. What a wonderful episode this was. I really enjoyed working on Theodosia Burr. For our listeners, of course, I encourage you to look us up on Facebook, History You Didn't Know. We're on Twitter. You can find us on Sounder FM, Google Podcast, and Spotify Podcast. We're all over the place. People just can't get away from us. If you'd like to contact us, you can contact us at email at historyyousshouldknow@gmail.com. That's history, the letter you should know, @gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
And we'll see you later.
This is the smell of the leftover tuna fish sandwich you left in your lunchbox over the weekend in a wimpy trash bag.
Wimpy, wimpy, wimpy!
Blech! And this is the smell of that same sandwich in a hefty, ultra-strong trash bag.
Hefty, hefty, hefty!
Ah, smell the difference? Hefty Ultra Strong has Arm & Hammer with continuous odor control, so no matter what's inside your trash, you can stay one step ahead of stinky. And for bigger jobs, try the superior strength of Hefty Large Black Bags.